Awesome. So how
Cool.
are you?
I'm good, man. How you doing, bro?
Great. Happy to have you on here, man. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, man. No, it's good to be on, bro. Yeah, sorry about the delay on it and everything. I was just fucking face was a little bit mangled for a while after. So,
No worries at all. Completely understand. And you're a man. You got a life as well. I get it.
it's good to finally be able to do this, man.
Yeah, it's an honor. So take us back to growing up in Canada and how you first discovered MMA. What was that environment like, and what drew you to combat sports?
It was pretty random. I saw the UFC like on TV, and I grew up like watching fights with my dad and stuff all the time. And then I don't know, just one day it clicked into me where I was like, huh. I want to like. I think I'd like doing that. And then I got on my bike and literally like biked like an hour and a half to find like the nearest local gym. And then yeah, the rest is kind of just history. I was just very like I remember like specifically I watched like Paul Taylor versus Paul Kelly. That was the fight that really made me want to do MMA for some reason. And then yeah, I was just hooked right after the first day.
You mentioned the fight with Paul Taylor and Paul Kelly. Is there any other fighters when you were originally watching UFC that really stuck out to you?
Like when I first started, I kind of almost started watching the UFC a little bit more like after I started training. I had like randomly just passed by my dad, like he pulled the trick that every dad does with their kids, where I had to find out 5 years after the fact that WWE is fake. So I just assumed everything that was combat sports related was fake. And then once I saw the UFC was actually a real thing, I was like, oh shit, that actually looks pretty cool. And then after, I started getting into a lineage of like the Pride era, with like Nogueira, Fedor, Vanderlei Silva. I was actually more of a Pride fan first than I was UFC fan, and then there was the guys like Rampage Jackson, Chuck Liddell at the time I was coming up. So those were kind of like the big names. But it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. I was just kind of like almost more drawn to like the violence aspect of it rather than you know, like the whole show of it, because UFC wasn't very popular at the time.
Well, that violence and that, love for watching it got you into MMA and it eventually got you on that regional and amateur scene. Tell me more about that when you were coming up and how that shaped you as a fighter now.
Yeah, I mean, I knew kind of, like I said, like even after the first day of training, I knew that I wanted to fight. I kind of went into the gym with the intention of wanting to fight. Um, so my first fight, I was like 14 years old. I was like drive. I had to make a drive like 10, 12 hours to Prince George for my first amateur fight. Um, so yeah, I ended up going out there and won my first fight by TKO. And I was just kind of drawn and hooked to it. But like I think the biggest thing is like when you're coming up as an amateur in BC at the time, it was pretty much just fighting like pro rules. I mean, my first amateur fight, I came out there and like kneed the guy in the face illegally like 3 times. Ref didn't say anything. It was kind of like uh, it was the perfect like timing uh, for me to go amateur, because I got all the experience of feeling what a pro fight was like. I just basically couldn't heel hook and elbow, and everything else was good to go. So it was good local regional circuit coming up for me at the time that I was competing as an amateur.
Well, that experience ended up landing you at TriStar Gym, and you're training under one of the most respected programs in the sport. How did that connection come about, and what has being in that environment specifically done for your development as a fighter?
Yeah, so my head coach when I first started, Cajun Johnson, he was an active pro fighter, and he moved to TriStar, just because at the time TriStar had the best fighters in all of Canada, had the best program, and it was at the time probably the best gym in the world. So he moved out there to go train full time, and then I kind of just followed in his footsteps. Um, then going out there, the coaches just really liked what they saw, in the sense of, I would get my ass kicked, but I'd still keep coming back for more. I was like a yes coach type of guy. Whatever they asked me to do, I carried myself with a lot of respect. So they ended up sponsoring me for years to stay out there. They got me to be a sparring partner of top level, UFC talent that was coming up. I was sparring partner for Yves Jabouin, Ivan Menjivar, Aimen Zahabi when he was not even in the UFC yet. So there were so many guys that would come in and out of the gym that I would be giving looks to, or pushing them for their training camp. And it kind of started with me getting my ass kicked there, and then eventually having some like epic wars that with multiple UFC fighters over the years of my time being there.
You mentioned specifically getting your ass kicked, which, as a great fighter you are, that really speaks to the level of skill at TriStar. Who are those guys that you're training with day to day that are at that level that, in my words, are pushing your limits and getting you better?
Yeah, I mean, I went out there when I was a kid. I was like a kid fighting grown men. That was always like any kid or any guy that was relatively around my age. It was just I was just too much for them. So I always had to train with people that were a lot older than me. So I was an amateur fighter sparring Yves Jabouin, who's getting ready to go fight in the UFC against Thomas Almeida, or I was fighting Ivan Menjivar, who's fighting like top contenders at bantamweight in the UFC at the time. So I was blessed to be around such high level training partners and so many other names of throughout the course of my years being there. I became really good friends with Arnold Allen, who's fighting this Saturday. Me and him, we spent a lot of time in the dorms together. My one of my good friends that I haven't spoken to in a long time, but Joe Duffy, one of the only guys to beat Conor McGregor. Me and him became really tight. Me and Rory MacDonald, he helped me a lot in my development. I had another guy, Mike Ricci, who helped me quite a bit when I was down there. So there was just a lot of top tier talent, and not to mention just Faraz really took a liking to me, and we became very close during my time out there. So I mean, and they have so many killers that are UFC talent. Like you're finally seeing Mandel on the big stage. Everyone's known about Mandel and how good he is for years now. Like this guy is probably the most talented fighter I've ever seen in a gym. He's had some great performances, but it still doesn't even speak to the volumes of how good he actually really is. And guys like Alex Morgan, one of my good buddies, Xavier Al-Louis. There's so many high level names there that I could go on for hours about it, and the names that have popped into the gym. Got a lot of training in with Lon Kavanaugh as well. So, lot of big names. A lot of big names.
Those are a lot of big names, and specifically, I had the opportunity to talk with Mandel, and he said that he's a student of the game first and a fighter second. Is that intellectual side of the fight game something that you all carry over at TriStar Gym?
I feel like everyone's obviously a little bit different. I feel like certain people would say the opposite of like that spectrum. I feel like I've always been somewhere like a blend in the middle. When it's the gym and when it's training, I'm that student. I'm the guy who will I have the mindset that everyone has something you can learn from them. So I have always kept a very wide open approach with my mind to being open to techniques and different theories and philosophies about fighting. But I would say at the core of who I am, I'd say I'm a little bit of a fighter first. I just think certain people have different approaches to it. I like to think I have the cerebral mind of a high level martial artist. It's why I've gone as far as I have, because you could have all the heart and determination in the world. If it's not backed by skill, you're going to get exposed. So you don't get to be a successful high level pro without having that mindset, in that willingness to learn and to adapt. But I feel like I have a little bit more of that spirit in me where I'm a little bit of a fighter first, I would say.
So you say you're a fighter first, and I can definitely see that with your finishing on the win side of your column. But you have this idea of how you can learn from everybody, and that's definitely an intellectual side of the game to have. Who in particular are you taking those major notes from on a day-to-day basis? And what does that look like in particular, whether it's in your striking or grappling?
Yeah, I mean, I've trained with a lot of high level coaches from Vegas to Montreal. I've gone to work with Freddie Roach. I've gone to work with like world class Muay Thai champions. Learn from them. Um, I'm pretty lucky that my head coach Cajun Johnson is constantly been such not only just such a high level brain to be able to pick knowledge from, but also like he's one of the guys that even in his retirement he stayed evolving, and I really feel like it's such a great chemistry I have with him, that I mean I feel like any questions I have about boxing, Muay Thai, wrestling, judo, jujitsu, it's just he's such a wealth of knowledge because he has that experience, um, at training at a high level, but also just all the time that he spent in the UFC and all the fights he had as well. Um, I feel like I have a really great chemistry with my head coach. Not to mention, I've had great coaches over the years. My wrestling coach that I used to have, Nick Aguala, he helped me a lot with my development. Commonwealth gold medalist. I've had great boxing coaches like Achilles Eschamadura. I've had a long tutelage under Faraz Zahabi with my groundwork and my MMA work. Bibiano Fernandez with my jiu-jitsu. So, I have a lot of experience working with high-level coaches, but I would say my head coach, Cajun Johnson's been my main source of inspiration when it comes to development and techniques.
So you've been with all of these, developed fighters and coaches along the years, and especially your head coach who's been there since the beginning. Is there anyone in particular that we can thank for the nickname the Gremlin, or is there a different is there a different origin for that awesome nickname?
No, you can definitely thank my head coach for that one too. Actually my original nickname was the Joker, and I was just like I'm just always shooting the shit. Like I was the most serious person on the mats, but that's why I got the nickname the Joker, because the second practice was over, I was just doing weird shit, fucking with people, trolling people from a young age. So I ended up getting the nickname the Joker. But then I think it wasn't until I fought that my coaches all kind of saw like how much of a an evil side to me that there is, because I'd always just be like laughing and whatever. And then my first amateur fight, I like pinned the guy down and mount, and I like, grabbed his throat. It was actually, I think it's an illegal technique that I utilized, but I just like clamped on his throat, started pounding him and screaming at the top of my lungs as I was like finishing this guy. It's a pretty animated finish, and then I get pulled off. The ref pulls me off, and then I didn't even know. I actually thought I was in trouble for some reason. I didn't even know the fight was over, and I was like, the ref like grabs me, pushes me off, and I was like, "What? I thought it's a fight." And then he's like, "Yeah, it's over." And then I was like, "Fuck yeah!" And then my coach Cajun comes in the ring, and he's like, I'm just screaming, like spit flying everywhere. And then he's like, "Bro, be happy. You won." And I'm like, "I am fucking happy." And then he's like, "You're like a little gremlin right now." And then I was like, "Ah, yeah!" And just started screaming, and I just went psychotic. And it was just like a high that I'd never experienced in life, because even my first amateur fight, I had like 3,000 people in attendance. It was a pretty big event because Bill Mahood was retiring that night, who's like a Canadian legend. So there was a lot of people in attendance, and yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. But yeah, that's where the origin of the Gremlin came from, and I originally hated the nickname, but then I just kind of stuck, and now I get it over the years. You know.
That is an awesome story. And where can we see that finish? Is it online anywhere?
It's gotta be online. I feel like that's one that I'll probably have to upload just so people understand the origin of the name, you know, because it was like I was 14 years old too, so it just looks like a little midget just like attacking this grown man. I was just a good old spaz attack on camera, you know. So it's pretty. I think it's on YouTube somewhere, but you got to do a bit of a deep dive.
I think I'm gonna have to after this. That is
Yeah.
insane. I mean, I'm gonna have to see the start to finish until they raise their
Yeah,
hand for
yeah.
that one.
It was a wild fight. No technique, just throwing overhands, tie clinching, threw him on the ground. It was a street fight pretty much, but all technique went out the window.
Well, you say all technique went out the window, but you mentioned some pretty high level grappling moves and takedowns. And throughout your career overall, your submission game has been a serious weapon with, 7 wins. Is that something that, you are specifically always developing, or did it just come naturally from your wrestling background?
Well, like I I just feel that I spent so much time with high level grapplers over my time of being at TriStar, and not to mention like Bibiano Fernandez is one guy that doing jiu-jitsu with him, and he doesn't care if you're brand new. He'll break your arm if you're not fast and reactive. So I think the type of grappling that I learned from a young age instilled a lot of good habits in me. It's very much about like getting to the top, scrambling, making sure that I'm always coming out on top in positions, you know? So I feel like my energy to scramble is limitless. You know what I mean? Like I don't have a limit. I don't get tired scrambling either, just because it's so programmed in my like body to just fight till I get on top. Um, I feel like my technique is quite a level above most people in the world that fight in MMA. Definitely, um, my ability to take advantage of one mistake, and it doesn't even have to be a mistake. You just attempting your moves, and my ability to counter it is just, in my opinion, for MMA, it's at a completely different level than most guys in the entire world. I feel like there's never a fight I walk into where I feel like I don't have the grappling advantage over my opponent. And a lot of the times, like I get this like, I don't know, like this narrative that I'm just a grappler. But a lot of the times it's like because of how hard I hit people on the feet that they'll actually clinch up with me, and then I reverse it, and I'm a well-rounded fighter. So I kind of just, I'm a very opportunistic fighter, like I don't have a set way of, I feel like I've won a fight almost every single way you can win a fight, from ground and pound to slams to body shots to left hook to, guillotine, rear naked choke, my amateur career, I won a lot of fights off my back as well. So I just feel like I'm so developed with my skill set to fight anywhere that these opportunities to submit people, I don't have to force it. I just have to play my game, and it'll just come.
And that ideology you have is, one of the pinpoints for why, you are a UFC fighter. I'd like to speak on the heroic battle that you've gone through with your health. But first, could you take us back to 2019 when, things were first beginning to change? What were the early signs in that period like, and what was it like before, you had any real answers?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty like, I like after the fight, I had a fight in July of 2019. I won the fight, but I just like a week after, like, I remember very specifically, I was like sitting in a backyard, and I started to get vertigo, like out of nowhere, and it wasn't from the fight because I didn't even get hit in the fight. Like there was no, everything was fine, but I had I just remember being like, why is the whole world like shifting right now? It look like, and then everything was becoming like very fuzzy. Like I couldn't. So I just thought that like maybe I'd gotten too much sun or something like that, and then it just didn't go away. And then I developed like these stomach problems. I thought it was a flu. Um, and these just symptoms just kept culminating and piling on, and it was just the weirdest thing. It was like I thought I contracted some virus, and it was just a virus that didn't go away for 4 years. Like I was completely healthy, like training every day, living an active lifestyle. There wasn't like this buildup. It just something hit me one day, and it didn't go away for years. And I had like so many different explanations. I had doctors that were lazy that just chalked up that you have a concussion, and I'm like, why is my stomach like this? Like, why am I throwing up? And like, they're like, well, yeah, this is a common side, but I'm like, this isn't like I know what a concussion is. I know I've experienced this. This isn't. And it was just almost like me trying to convince doctors, but they see a guy come in their ears that they hear the background of being an MMA fighter. They see the cauliflower ears. They think some stupid guy with CTE that they're trying to get out of their office, and it was just, in my opinion, it was a lot of laziness by a lot of doctors that just kind of wanted to rush me out of the office. And I think at the time too, as my health conditions started to progress, COVID started to happen. So priorities of the world were just shifting as well. So they weren't really wanting to, it was just I actually like tell people it was the worst time in the world to get sick, because just like the madness of the world, like no one cared about anything that wasn't a virus. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I'm really struggling. And then it wasn't until like 2.5 years into my sickness when I I'd actually like already had like sepsis and like gone to a medically induced coma. And then it wasn't until my face, everything that happened with like my skin and all the conditions where it started to create like a physical manifestation that people could see, before they took it seriously at all. And it was just kind of hell, because it was like 2.5 years, 3 years of just pure suffering. Like I would go through these huge weight fluctuations where I'd gain like 30 pounds because I could finally eat. Then I'd like lose 20 pounds. And this was happening on like a frequent basis, and I would get so sick sometimes where I couldn't eat for 3 days, and like constant puking. I had a headache every day for like 3 years. To like the point where like I would just take like sleeping medications throughout the day just to stay asleep, because the headaches were just too much. And then insomnia to the point where I like almost felt like I was like hallucinating, because I'm just like, holy shit, like I haven't slept in 3 days. Like high blood pressure, just oh man, it was just such a crazy roller coaster, man. It was just so much ups and downs with no answers and no certainty of if I was going to get better, because I was only really getting worse over time.
You mentioned all of these, awful things that, you unfortunately had to go through, and you persevered, and you've gone through so much adversity, and at that peak of your illness, doctors weren't giving you a high chance of survival. But, we look here today and you're thriving and you're a UFC fighter. Back in that period of your life, what was it actually like, and how did you get through it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like love to say that it was like this heroic stance I took, but it wasn't. Like it was like it got so bad to the point where I was like, man, I'm ready to pack this in, because I don't want to live like this anymore. It wasn't. It actually took me a long time to actually develop the courage to be like, okay, I think I can really beat this thing, because it was so dark at that time in my life. because the world's already in a dark place. But I didn't really feel like at that time in my life I really had a good sense of community around me either. So it was just largely me just going through this by myself for 3 years with no answer. And it was really difficult and challenging, especially because of just the circumstances of like what I've lost already to, because of this. And then I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel, like, for a long time. Majority of my sickness, I didn't see a light. I would try to get in a positive place about how I'm going to beat this, but the symptoms were so drastic and so severe that at one point I was like, I think I'd be actually at more peace if I did pass from this, because like I don't want to live like this anymore. And that's just the truth. Like, obviously I didn't want to die, but my God, I didn't want to live through any of that. I would never want to have to go through that period of my life ever again. That's all I can say about that is it was a very difficult and challenging thing to go through, harder than any fight I've ever been in. It gave me a lot of perspective, and there's a lot of great things that came out of it. My view, my outlook on life, but it was a very dark time in my life that I'm not looking to, it's almost like even talking about it and like reflecting on it. It feels like it was so long ago, but it wasn't even that long ago. And I don't know what to say about it other than the fact it was dark. It was hell. And it's just a chapter that I almost like, in a weird way, it's like I almost don't like remembering it, because I have seen how bad life can get now. That I'm like, hey, I got a beautiful family now. I got a beautiful wife. I got my little boy. I'm like so lucky to just be here. But it was very challenging, very difficult, for sure. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through.
And the hardest thing you've ever gone through, I mean, I can say that's the hardest thing I've heard, anyone go through. You are just an absolute warrior for going from that to, now being a cage fighter at the highest level. And it is honorable to, you have a beautiful family and, an amazing career ahead of you. So it's just awesome to see someone come from that point in their life to where they are now. And
appreciate that, man.
Of course. So you got the treatment, and it was 2023, and you're saying it's the first time you felt normal in years. And what was that moment like when you finally got back in the gym and things are starting to feel right again?
It was like really emotional in a great way. Like I was like getting back into training. Like I remember very vividly, like my first day back of real training, and I just felt like I feel like that actually, like, as much as the medication and stuff started to make me feel better, that day I remember, like, when I actually got back in the mats, that was the first day I ever felt like myself again. I was like, oh, I'm back, and I remember like my first training session of just moving, I told my coach, I was like, I can't wait to fight again. And he's like, you're crazy. Let's just take this one day at a time. And yeah, I was just, it was the best, man. It's the best thing ever. Like getting back into the flow of who I am. I feel like my whole life I've always known being a martial artist. So for me to get back to my roots was just the best.
I can completely see that. It's like putting a fish right back into the ocean where it belongs. 100%
yeah,
there.
Exactly, man. It's like, it's just my home. Fighting is my home.
100%, and I'm happy that you found a new home in the UFC. I'd like to talk about your debut, and I know that it didn't go the way that was planned, but it's important to note that it was accepted on short notice against John Yannis in Winnipeg on April 18th. Can you walk me through the decision to take that fight? Because I know you, following the fight, had a pretty emotional and powerful reflection via Instagram. So talk me through just the decision to take it and the beginning of that camp.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had so many, so basically, I was having a hard time getting a fight after my last fight. I reached out to my manager and I just said, it was like, hey man, what can we do? What's the word? Is contenders an option? And just not really hearing anything back, right? And like, keep in mind, I'm a person that's had to decline a contender series fight because of my health. I didn't make it onto 2 different seasons of the Ultimate Fighter. One of them, I literally got flown out there, made it to the final day, and then I got sent home. So I have had so many like close calls and, almost there with the UFC so many times. I really felt like this could have been my last offer ever. They are not waiting on anyone. The UFC is a machine that if you don't answer, someone else will. And I felt like if I didn't take it, I really do feel like with that offer being presented specifically to me, that could have been my final shot. So I get the call like the same day I text my manager. Me and my wife, I'm like a bit in my feels just because I'm like, babe, I don't know where this, like, I don't know where to go with this. Do I keep winning and beating these tough regional guys in these hard nosed fights? So 3 hours later, after eating a burger, about 3 glasses of ginger ale, some hot wings, my manager texts me and says, "Do you want to fight in the UFC at 135?" So I'm at work. I go step on the scale, and I'm 165 pounds. So at first, in my head, fuck, if only I would have known sooner that this was even a possibility. So in my head, I'm already like, I can't because I'm 30 pounds overweight. And, it's just a reality that, like, I've never done a weight cut that big before. I think my biggest weight cut in a period of time like that, I think was like 22 pounds. I'm a guy who likes to be on top of things. So I basically am contemplating in my head about like call everyone. I call my team. They're all saying you have to, like, bro, we will, like, you got to do this. So then everyone in my circle that's a bunch of fighters, everyone's like, you have to. I talked to like 5 different professional high level nutritionists. Every single one of them tell me, not only will you not make weight, but this is a horrible idea. Like, this is just. So then I just need to hear someone tell me I can't do something, and then I'm gonna do it because I just work like that in a weird way. I just have a chip on my shoulder. And then my manager was telling me, he's like, I just want you to understand the consequences of if we miss. And I swear, like, having that doubt in my head of like people wondering if I can make it made me want to do it even more. So I take it. It was no excuses, no excuses at all, because this is how most people get their shot. So, but the level of discipline that I had to have, it was basically like 3.5 hours of cardio a day, eating about 900 calories of like egg whites, a little bit of chicken, and like some blueberries before training. That was every day for 2 weeks. I didn't know how to make this. No nutritionist really thought that it was a good idea, so I didn't really do it with my strength and conditioning coach now, TJ Sider, kind of guided me through it. And I wish I would have listened to him a little bit more, because I basically just like went into starvation mode. Like, I elevated my kidneys like a week before the fight. Like, I got some blood work done, and things were looking, I guess I'll just put it this way, they were looking a bit stressed. So I didn't know if there was even like a healthy way to do this. So I'm like, I'm just going to do it. 2 weeks out, I'm 30 pounds out. And then I just like threw the kitchen sink at the diet, like 3-4 hours of cardio a day. And the fight kind of felt like it was more about making weight than it was about the actual fight.
Mm-hmm.
I can say, like, I don't feel that it was like obviously like longevity wise and performance wise. I knew that there was an aspect of my performance is probably going to suffer a little bit because of this, but I looked as like it was my ticket in the door. I still felt like I was going to win the fight, though, to be honest. Like, I wasn't like I felt like I had such a big advantage over him in specific areas that I'm like, I'm going to win this fight still, even if I feel like shit. Throughout the week, it was hard. Like, I won't lie. The whole weight cut was hard. Everything was really difficult. It was the hardest fight week I've ever had to go through, just in the sense of like the energy depletion was done. I would stand up and I would just be so lightheaded throughout the week. But I did my job. I made weight. Fast forwarding to like fight day, I just felt so lethargic. And again, these are not excuses because this is how you get your call. But I was actively fighting at 145. I was kind of staying on standby for the Mauricio Barboza and
Mm-hmm.
Dennis fight. I thought that that's the only way my name would get called. So having to cut that extra 10, 11 pounds was pretty brutal. It was pretty shit. I won't lie. I felt like I went out there like 50% of myself. But I still feel like I just was missing that like explosivity. I was missing that like fire. Just largely due to my energy levels, just being completely honest. Yannis is a great fighter. He fought the perfect strategy that you would want to use against me. So I give him credit for that. He fought beautifully, not taking anything away from him. I feel that is a very different fight with proper notice, and me healthy. And that's all I can say about that. I mean, I pride myself on like having high goals. For me, the goal wasn't to just get in the UFC. I'm not happy just saying I got here. Like for me, it's like I want to get to the top, make a run for the title. So I don't feel like I quite have that feeling yet. Like I'm a UFC fighter because, like for me, I'm gonna establish myself and validate that I deserve to be here with a win. The whole thing doesn't sit very well with me, just in the sense of like I know that wasn't myself out there, and it really bothers me. But we got to live with the result, and we did what we had to do to get signed. At the end of the day, it was a pretty crazy ask, but I got it done, and my discipline got me my opportunity that I've always wanted. So I think the best thing I can do is just to look at the positives of it. I'm in the UFC where I always wanted to be, and a couple great performances can erase this memory.
And on that, you posted that the UFC has already assured you of that, next fight. And I saw on your story either today or tomorrow on that bike, practicing to be the full-time bantamweight. So it seems like everything is going much better following the win with, weight and just overall, that you have a call in the future. You're keeping that weight, smart. And what do you think that this version of Jame Siraj in this next fight with a full camp, proper weight cut is going to look like compared to his last fight?
I feel like a hell of a lot more explosive. I feel like my preparation that I'll be able to employ. I just I prefer to just like let my actions speak. I don't feel like I'm gonna have to tell people. I think they'll see it. I think they'll see a difference. Like I had a hard time pulling the trigger and being explosive because I knew I had about 3 or 4 heavy bursts in me, and I didn't want to get tired with a power puncher in front of me in Yannis. So I think the stars aligned, and that was his night. But I really do feel like um, the version of myself will be a guy that isn't being lazy, isn't cutting the corners, and is ready for those calls. You know what I mean? And I really do feel like I just wasn't ready to take that call, but I did. And I wish I was just a little bit more on top of it. I know the UFC rarely comes to Canada, and I've been kind of contemplating with this move to 35 for a while now. And if I even thought there was a possibility, I should have been ready to take it. So that's not an excuse. That's just, in my opinion, I take full ownership for this loss, because if I thought there was even a possibility, like this is what I've been working for 17 years. So to keep my diet on track and to be ready for something that's coming into my country where I know that there is even a slight possibility I could get that call, I should have been ready for that. And that's just something that will never happen again. And I will go into all these fights at my very best. So win or lose, I can live with that result, because right now I'm having a really hard time accepting this, because I don't even feel like it's a quarter of what I'm capable of. And I'm eager to show that, and I'm eager to change the narrative and right that wrong.
I can understand where you come from with this displeasing with your last fight, but on my point of view, this is super exciting to see. I'm seeing a UFC fighter with a chip on his shoulder who is definitely going to prove what he already knows to the world in his next fight. So just seeing this, motivation is awesome to see from a fighter who's going to make that next jump.
Yeah, I'm it's just driving me mental. Like every day I'm just like, the fact that I don't have a fight booked right now is driving me crazy. But I'm also just like really taking this time right now to just work on things that I don't normally do. Like I've been doing my entire career with not doing any strength and conditioning. I've like I mean, secrets out now. Like I've never really done strength and conditioning ever. And I've always been able to like be the guy who still comes out on top. So I just think dialing in and being more disciplined about things that I don't like doing, and don't enjoy doing. I feel like making all those little tiny strides are going to make such a big difference. I'm developing a plan with my team that I really do feel like is going to allow me to not just be a great fighter, but a great fighter at the highest level against the best fighters in the world. Because now, like, my job doesn't get any easier here. Getting to the UFC, it's not like it's all sunshine and rainbows. These guys, the fights only get harder. The competition only gets tougher and tougher. And these guys want it just as bad as I do. So I have to hold myself to a higher standard. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm out of camp right now, training 3 times a day, 4 times a day right now. So I'm just looking to be at my best for whenever that call comes, and I'll be ready, and I'll be focused, sharp, and just ready to prove that what I already know. I'm one of the best bantamweights in the world, and I don't care who will laugh at that statement. Anything I say I'm going to do, I've done it in my career. When I say I'm going to bounce back from a loss, I bounce back from a loss. When I say after I got wheel kicked and I told people that I was going to make it to the UFC still, I did that. I've said it from when I was an amateur fighter, I'm going to make it to the UFC. So whatever I say, I always end up doing. So I think I'm just drawing strength from that, knowing how powerful my mind is, that if I tell myself that something is going to happen, it's going to happen. And I have no doubt about that. So I'm just looking to go out there, my next fight, and just put on a vicious performance that shows what I'm capable of. Because at the end of the day, I look at it as like I shouldn't be in any race of competition with anyone else. I'm focused on my own journey and accomplishing my goals, and whoever stands across me is just a byproduct. Is it's about me, and I'm just focused on what I have to achieve.
That's awesome to hear. You have the mindset and the skill set, and for that next call, whoever's on the other side of that cage, they better be ready.
Yeah, I think Ricky Turcios is a good name. You know, we're two guys. You know, I'm 0-1 in the UFC. He's on a little bit of a losing skid. You know, I feel like let's see who deserves to stay there and keep our spot. You know, I think that's a pretty good matchup to make for August or September. So you know, that's someone I'd be interested in looking at. He's a Ultimate Fighter winner. So it's still a good name to take out. He's got wins in the UFC as well, so why not?
Yeah, I completely see that being a realistic matchup. You can't discredit a guy like Ricky Turchios. Even though he's on that skid, he still is, a UFC fighter and super talented, similar with yourself. So I can see that
Oh,
being a very high level fight.
yeah, he's a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
He's a warrior. Like the guy fights with his heart every single time. So you know, I actually have been specifically just kind of looking at the entire roster, and I think for just where I'm at and where he's at, I think it's the perfect fight. He's had so many like exciting fights from the Ultimate Fighter to being in the UFC. I think it's a great fight to make.
I do as well. I have two more questions for you today, and before that, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to hop on the call. And
I
it's been a
appreciate it, man.
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, outside of the cage, when the gloves are off, who is Jamie Siraj?
I feel like I don't really show like who I am. Like I don't know. I feel like I'm always like just trying to look at life through the lens of like a sense of humor. I feel like I'm always just like joking around. My wife gets so upset with me because I can never have a serious conversation. I feel like I'm always just like, goofing off. Like I have a crazy little 1-year-old boy that acts just like his dad, rambunctious, always getting into trouble. I feel like who I am outside of the cage hasn't really been highlighted or shown, but I just feel like I'm always just like, I don't know, just trying to not take life too serious, enjoy it. Um, you know, I love spending time with my family. I'm a pretty simple guy in the sense like it doesn't take too much for me to be happy in life. Um, but yeah, I just feel like, just like a laid back dude that likes to joke around with his family.
It's a super awesome answer. You got two sides of you, training and family. And at your point, I think that's you're at the perfect place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love my life. My boy, my lady, there's my whole world, and not to mention I have the coolest job in the world, you know. It's not many jobs in the world where you get to punch someone in the face if you don't like them. And my job, I get paid for it. So it's pretty awesome.
100%. I have one more question just to close this out. After, all you've been through, you're still here, you're still fighting, and now you're fighting at the highest level. What do you want people to take from your story and where you are now?
I think that it's possible, even when it seems unlikely. Like I have so many young kids that I've coached over the years, and the one thing I really try to reiterate to people is like, okay, if you want it, then go get it. Like it's actually that simple. Like I feel like there's always going to be 1,000 excuses as to why you can't do something. Look for that one reason that makes it all worth it, And for me, like coming from Chilliwack, like where I grew up, it's like a hick town where like dreams go to die. You know what I mean? Like I left it for a reason, but like I remember when I was like coming up and everyone told me how delusional I was for like wanting to be a pro fighter, and I just always told people like, yeah, we'll see, and I try to reiterate that to people that like ask me. I think especially like people put guys like us on a pedestal of like because we fight in the UFC or something like that. I tell people like I'm no different than you. I literally will never let my mindset change or let my personality change with any success because I know how human I am. I have been to the most fragile places that will test your character, your strength, your will. With my illness, I've been through a lot of stuff in my life where I feel like I always wanted to quit. To be honest, like I've always wanted to quit in some of these spots I've been in my life, but look for that one reason why. Like when I'm getting smashed in my fight with Gustavo Eric, and I took it on short notice. I have no conditioning. This guy is just in shape. He's a tank, and I remember like him smashing my face. My why that night was my son. I literally I remember I was like on bottom, getting smashed, and I was like, I told myself some wild shit. I was like, I don't know why I did this, but I was like, if you don't get up right now, your son's going to be homeless and you guys are going to have nothing in your life and everyone's going to know you're a loser. Well, that's enough motivation to get the fuck up. You know what I mean? So,
100%.
I think look for that one reason why. Look for that one reason why it's worth it, why it's possible, and just follow that. Because at the end of the day, if you are willing to work for what you want in life, it'll happen. So just focus on the positives and focus on that one reason why.
And it's such an important thing to take away from all of this, from someone who's really been at the lowest to the highest now, fighting at that highest level. And that's all I have for today. I just wanted to thank you again for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure, and when that next call comes soon enough, it'd be an honor to hop on again, break down that fight with you.
Absolutely, my man. Anytime, bro. And yeah, it was a pleasure, man. Great talking to you. And yeah, man, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
You too. Take care, my man.
Thank you.